All right, welcome to lesson 4, everyone. In lesson 4, we're going to be shifting away from using R and R packages for our data sets that we're playing with for sentiment analysis. So, for example, we've been using the Jane Austen books, and to date in Unit 1, we've been using text from Project Gutenberg, and we're going to be moving into this century with terms of text for analysis. And specifically, we're going to be working with Twitter data to perform some data pulls and some data cleaning and some sentiment analysis with tweets. So let's go ahead and get started. I had mentioned in a previous announcement that if you are interested in setting up your own Twitter developer account, it's actually a pretty easy process to go ahead and set that up. I believe I shared in a previous announcement a link to Chris Bale's Texas Data course where he provides instructions for setting that up. And it is actually a pretty easy process. It does not take very long. This is an example. This is my Twitter developer account that I set up quite a long time ago for some social network analysis work. And in that, you'll be provided with keys and tokens that you'll use for passing along your credentials for pulling data from Twitter, which I'm going to show in just a little bit. So again, if you're interested in setting it up, the instructions are in a previous announcement. I'll make sure to add them to the lesson as well. But let's go ahead and get started with actually working with some of this Twitter data. So assuming you have gone ahead and set up your Twitter developer account, I'm going to show you how to use that information obtained from your account to begin pulling Twitter information, Twitter data from Twitter via RStudio and R. I'm going to scroll through here really quick. As you're going through the review process, you're going to get this notification on your account that says your account is under review, and then once that has passed review, then you will be receiving your keys and access tokens, which we'll be using to pass through in R to Twitter's API to get some of those tweets. I also wanted to just kind of remind everyone that this is an optional option for this lesson. You're not required to set up a Twitter developer account. It's just that if you would like to set one up, this is going to show you the process of how to go about doing it. Again, it's not a very difficult thing to set up, and if you're interested in working with Twitter data and tweets down the road, I highly recommend setting one up and getting all this stuff in place. So once you receive your consumer keys, your consumer secret API keys, etc., we're going to end up using that information in RStudio to go ahead and connect to Twitter's API. So let me show you what that looks like, for example. So over here, I've already installed this package that we're going to be using to pass along these credentials to Twitter. It's called the rtweet package. Since I've already installed it, I've loaded it. Other things we're going to be using in this lesson is the tidyverse set of packages, dplyr, ggplot, etc., things you're already familiar with, and also tidy text that we used in Unit 1 for doing some basic word counts, frequencies, tokenizing text, etc., etc. And then finally, just going to check to make sure that I'm working in the right place. So this is my working directory where I have all my data and things like that. So I have already set up my developer account. I have my keys and tokens over here. I'm not going to show them in the video because then other people could obviously go ahead and use those to access Twitter information. But you would go ahead and enter the name of your app there, your consumer key, consumer secret, access token, access, just like this, and all this information I have simply copied over from there. And then we're going to use one simple function. We're going to pass all of that information through this function to create a token. And then once we've done that, we have access to Twitter's data. So it's a pretty straightforward process. As you can see, it's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines of code, and then you're good to go. So let's go ahead and get started now that we've already connected to Twitter's API. So we can actually start pulling tweets right now. First function that I want to show you is comes from the rtweet package. Let's go ahead and take a look at that package really quick. So rtweet package, not a lot of information there, but I have shared in our lesson links, a link to kind of the full description and tutorial of the rtweet package and all the various things that you can do. There's a whole mess of things you can do. You can search for tweets by keywords. In this case, we're going to be searching for a tweet by hashtag. You can do some quick plotting of those tweets. You can pull randomly sample from the live stream of tweets. You can get information about friends and followers if you're interested in doing some social network analyses, and you can get the timelines of actual individuals, individual users, which I'll walk you through a demonstration of a little bit later. So that's kind of a quick snapshot overview of the rtweets package. I've already set that up. Again, we passed through our information, our credentials onto Twitter so we can start pulling data. And I'm going to use this search tweet function right over here to pull some data that I'm interested in. So I'm going to pull some data from Twitter users that are using the hashtag NCED, the NCED hashtag. And let's take a look at what these tweets using the NCED hashtag actually look like. So let's do a quick search. Hashtag NCED. And these are primarily going to be tweets about education in North Carolina. This is a pretty popular hashtag. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. So you can see quite a few tweets about education here in North Carolina. Lots of information being shared. And effectively, what we're going to be doing is we're going to use this search tweet function. We're going to tell it to search. The first argument is the search word or the key term that you want to look for. In our case, it's hashtag NCED. And we're going to tell it to just pull the first 500 tweets available. I think, don't quote me on this, but I think you can pull up to 5,000 or more tweets. In our case, we're not going to pull that many. And also, we don't want to include the retweets in this just because it's going to be a duplication of a number of tweets. So we don't need to see the same tweet 3 or 4 or 5 times if people have tweeted that particular post over and over and over. So we're going to set include retweets as false. So let's go ahead and pull those tweets. So you can see down here that it's searching for tweets. It's finished collecting tweets, all done. So we should have 500 tweets for the hashtag NCED. We called them NCED tweets. So we can see right there we have 500 observations. And you can also see that there's a lot of data collected on each of those individual tweets. So each of those individual tweets has 88 variables containing information about those particular tweets. Let's actually go ahead and take a look at this in the console so we can see what we're looking at here. So as you can see, 500 tweets, 88 variables. We're going to take a look at, I think, the first 6 or 7 variables. The very first variable in this data set is the user ID, status ID, when the tweet was posted or created, the user, the one who posted this quote. The one who posted this tweet, the actual text of the tweet, where it comes from, etc., etc. Let's actually go ahead and take a look at all 88 of these variables that are included in this Twitter data. Go ahead and use this glimpse function. This comes from the, oh goodness, I think it comes from the, there it is, the Tibbles, the Tibble package from tidyverse. That's part of the tidyverse set of packages. And this allows us to just quickly look at all of the variables in this data set. So we have user ID, status ID, when it was created, the source. In this case, it looks like some people are posting from the Twitter web client in the browser. Some people are posting from their iPhone. Let's see. Since we told it that we did not want any retweets, there are no retweets So each one of those is going to be false because they're not retweets. And as you can see, there's a ton of information that is collected about each individual tweet that can potentially be used. Let's actually go ahead and take a look at the entire data set here. There we go. So now we can get a sense of this information a little bit better. So there's, you can see the actual text of the tweet, the source of where it's coming from. Let's keep scrolling here. If any URLs are included in the tweet, the actual URLs, and so on and so forth. So you can see this is a pretty powerful tool for getting tweets that you might want to use for doing sentiment analysis with Twitter. Another function I want to show you in the, there we go, in the rtweet package is the user's data tweet. So this is going to take this data set that we have here, and it's just going to pull information on all the users that are using this nced hashtag. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Let's actually, hold on, I actually kind of want to view these. So let's go ahead and view these in the preview window. So you can see we have, here we go, NC Forum, NC Policy Watch. Let's see, scroll in my future NC, and let's see. So you can see there's a lot of people, and then you get a sense of, at least within the last 500 tweets, how frequently these people are using this hashtag. Something else I wanted to point out with the rtweets package is that there is just a really quick plotting function that allows you to take the tweets that you've pulled and do some just quick plotting to see over the course of whatever days you specify. In the example here, they specify the past 3 hours. In our example, we're going to take our nced tweets, and we're not going to specify any timeline. We're just going to say all the tweets that we've taken these past 500 tweets, go ahead and plot those as far back as they go. So let's go ahead and plot that. Really quickly, before I plot it, I do want to go over some of these lines of code. These first couple of lines here are just visual aesthetics for the plot. In this case, it's saying using the minimal theme. So as you can see over here in this plot that I did just prior to this, it removes a lot of the shading and keeps it as simple as possible. And then the only other layers that we add onto this particular ggplot are just labels. So that's pretty much it. You can see that we have X and Y labels. We tell it not to specify at all. We tell it that for the title, we want it to be up here, frequency of our stats, etc. And then also we told it to include a subtitle for our labels. And then finally, we also told it to include a caption. So let's go ahead and run this and do a quick plot here. And it's going to show you the one that I just had pulled up. Let's zoom in there and take a look at that. So you can see on the 20th of February, as far back as these tweets go, looks like there's a lot of activity, quite a bit actually, and then it died down on the 21st, and then gradually it's just sort of tapering off here. So that's the quick plotting function. One last thing I want to show you is the get timelines function. So this allows you to get the tweets for specific individuals, including their posts, things they retweet, etc., etc. So I'm going to go ahead. Let's take a look here. We're going to use the get timelines function. And we're going to tell it to include myself here. My little Twitter handle is speical, and my colleague at the Friday Institute, Mark Sandberg. And then we're going to go ahead and tell it to pull the last 500 tweets for each of us. And I'm just going to store this as an object that I can then call up a little bit later to do some plotting with. I'm going to call that FI staff. So let's go ahead and run that. And run. So you can see that's still working. It's done. Let's go ahead and actually take a quick look at that, FI staff. So there we go. We can see my most recent tweets. Let's actually just go ahead and take a look at it up here in the window. There we go. So we can see my most recent tweets. You can see I've had one as early as this morning. And then if we wanted to do some quick sorting, we'd take a look at Mark Sandberg's tweets. And there we go. We can check his out. There we go. So that gives you a sense of what we can do. We could add as many people to this combine function as we wanted to. I've only added a couple. If we only just wanted to pull tweets for one person at a time, we could pull those 500 tweets or 1,000 or 2,000, as many as we wanted to, and just specify the Twitter handle of that one individual. When I say Twitter handle, let me show you exactly what I mean. So I am at SBKellogg. So when I am pulling individual people or something like news organizations or whoever is the owner of that particular Twitter handle, that's where I'm pulling it from. So I'm going to go ahead and pull my tweets as well. And let's go ahead and take a look at my tweets. So there we go. We can see that that's my last tweets right there. So let's go back now. There we go. All right. And I'm going to use this example just from the rtweet tutorial here. And I'm going to plot both my tweets, the FI-stat tweets that include both myself and Mark Sandberg. So let's go ahead and plot those. And keep in mind, it's only the last 500 tweets for each of us, I believe. I'm going to go ahead and plot those. As you can see, all of this should look pretty familiar. I'm using this dplyr function right here. And I'm saying I want to only include the tweets from just this past year. There's going to be more of them. For me in particular, I do not tweet very often, so 500 tweets for me is probably going to cover like 6 or 7 years of tweets. And then also I'm going to say let's group by screen name. So we're going to use the group by function from dplyr to say let's do plots for, we're going to do, some line plots for myself and Mark Sandberg. And then we have some information we're just going to pass along related to title, and then finally our labels, etc., etc. And this is what we get when we run this. As you can see, compared to Mark Sandberg, just for January through present day, I do not tweet nearly as much as Mark does. So that's it for the rtweets package over here. Again, the primary purpose of using this package is to pass along your Twitter developer information, which includes your keys and tokens, essentially your credentials that say you have permission to access the Twitter API in order to pull tweets. It also has some useful functions which allow us to pull individual users' data or to do specific searches. I only showed you a couple of examples here, but there's a ton of other things that you can do with it. So let's go ahead and move on now to another example of actually doing some sentiment analysis with some of this Twitter data. So I'm gonna, there we go. I'm gonna move us along to Chris Bale's quick tutorial on sentiment analysis using the Trump tweets that he pulled earlier in this lesson. Again, this is linked in the lesson forum where you're viewing this video. And let's go ahead and run through some of his stuff right here. Oops, scroll back up here. Sorry about that. So I'm running this bit of code right here. And let me walk you through everything that this is doing. This load URL is basically telling R to locate the URL, so go online, and this R data that Chris has stored online is going to pull that in. So when I go ahead and run that, I'm going to see that it's pulled in a number of here we go. That's what it's pulled in. So it's pulled in a data frame of Trump's tweets. I forget the dates of these. I think it's from 2017, actually. And as you can see, it doesn't include all 88 variables. He's filtered this out, but it does include about 3,196 tweets. So let's go ahead and take a look at those. Go ahead and run this. Then we can view these tweets. As you can see, at least for this time period, he tended to tweet from his iPhone. We can see his screen name. We have timestamps for all the tweets, any hashtags he used, URLs, etc., etc. So you should, even if you're not, don't have a Twitter developer account, and even if you don't have credentials and you're not using the API, you should be able to follow along with this lesson because you can load it directly from the data that Chris Vail has stored on the web for us. We've already loaded these as part of the tidyverse set of packages, and then in the prerequisites we loaded tidytext, which we're going to be using. So now we have these Trump tweets. We've already loaded the packages that we need. Let's go ahead and tokenize this. So this is going to feel very familiar from Unit 1, where effectively we're taking those Trump tweets. We're only going to select, sorry about that, out of those 42 variables. We don't need all of those. The only thing we're going to be working with for this is the created at time, so when it was posted to Twitter, and the actual text of the tweets. Those are the only two things that we're interested in. So if you remember from the dplyr lessons, we're using the select function to only select these, the select function to only select these particular columns or variables. Remember, select will give us the columns that we're interested in, and filter is when we want to select specific rows. And then finally, we have this unnest tokens function, which should feel pretty familiar. This is from the tidytext package, and we're saying we want to create a new column from the text of these tweets, and we're going to take all the text that's in each row of the text column, and then we're going to change it into a new column called word, and it's going to break down and it's going to tokenize it by word. So each of those words and each of those texts are stored in a individual row. So let's actually go ahead and run that, and then let's go take a look at what that looks like. So this is our tidy Trump tweets, and there we go. So we can see on 2018, I guess these are a little bit more recent than I thought. You can see that just met with etc., etc., etc. Actually, you can read through the actual content of this tweet at, let's see, sorry, that is, I'm trying to think military time. That's 10 o'clock, I think, 10:41 p.m. So you can see this is all from one individual tweet, and it's been tokenized by word. This, again, should feel familiar from the tidytext package. We are taking our stop words, and we're going to use that anti-join function. So this should feel also very familiar. And we're going to take those tweets, we're going to remove all stop words, and then we're going to do counts of the words. And again, we don't want to count the number of stop words. Those are not very useful for us. So let's go ahead and run this. And let's take a look at it. So out of this full range of tweets, out of those 3,000 tweets, we get a sense of which words are included the most. As you can see, we have some information that is not very helpful for us for looking at word counts. People, news, president, fake, Trump, country, etc., etc. Pretty useful, including the HTTPS and t.co for URLs, etc. Not especially useful. So we are going to figure out here how to remove those words that we're really not interested in. And to do that, we're going to use something called a grep, which I believe stands for Global Regular Expression Parser or Pattern, something like that. Long story short, though, this example provides a way of filtering out particular characters or strings or expressions. And what's going on here is we're telling it to search for a number of things in particular. It's looking for HTTPS within this string of text. Specifically, it is looking in the Trump tweet top words data frame, and it's looking specifically in the column called word, which we just created through that unnest tokens function. And then it's looking for a few things. It's looking for HTTPS. There's a little, I forget what this symbol is called, but it's a little line break, a little operator that means or. So it's saying find HTTPS or rows that contain t.co in the word column, or rows that contain AMP, or rows that contain RT. And this is something we have not come across yet, but this is a different way of filtering out rows through base R. So effectively, we're using these brackets. In the brackets, when we're doing filtering, you essentially have two arguments. The first argument is what to look for in the rows, and then the second argument here is which column that you want to look at. So again, we're filtering out these things. To tell it to find those things and keep the things that we don't want, we're putting this little negative sign in front of grep to say, don't use any rows that contain these characters in the word column. So hopefully that makes sense. We're actually going to take our Trump top tweet top words data frame, and we're just going to store it as the exact same thing. So we're going to write over basically what we've already created. So let's go ahead and run that. And let's view that again. And now you can see that those characters have been removed. So no more HTTP, no more RT, which stands for retweet. So those have all been removed. So that's one way of removing characters from a column, basically by telling it to select rows that do not contain whatever it is we want to list. So let's go ahead and begin some very basic sentiment analysis with these tweets. We're already familiar with this AFIN lexicon, which basically assigns scores from -5 to 5, but let's go ahead and take a look at that. So we can see abandon has a score of -2. We're actually not going to use this particular lexicon. Instead, we're going to use the Bing lexicon. And let's run through this code that's provided in the example from Chris Bale really quick. We're going to take these tidy Trump tweets. We're going to pass that on, and this is going to feel very familiar from previous lessons. We're going to take inner join, and we're going to use the get sentiments. We're going to use the Bing lexicon, which, if you recall from the previous lesson, only contains an assignment, a label, a category of positive or negative for specific words. In this inner join, if you recall, this is saying take all of the words that are in the Trump tweets and take all of the words that are in this Bing lexicon, and where we find matches for the column of words, the column called words, where we find matches, we're going to keep all of those rows, and then we're going to keep the data for both data sets that's including in both of those rows. So basically what we're doing is removing any words from the tweets that are not in the Bing lexicon, and then we're assigning a category saying whether it's positive or negative. So let's actually go ahead and do that before we do our counts and take a look at what we get there. So I'm going to run that, and let's take a quick look at this. And as you can see, we have negative words, positive words, etc., etc., etc. And again, it's just assigned a positive or negative category. We haven't done any counting yet. So if this word like great shows up more than once, it's going to show up many times here in our actual table. But we don't want that to happen. We just want to say how many times has that that particular word showed up. So what we're going to do is we're going to tell it to do a count of those things. So at the created at time, and remember each tweet has its own specific timestamp, so this is the equivalent of saying for each individual tweet, count how many times a given word occurs and whether it's positive or negative. So let's go ahead and run that. And let's take a look at the first 6 instances of this. Actually, you know what, let's go ahead and just view the entire thing. So view Trump tweets sentiment, and let's take a look at this. There we go. Let's do some sorting just manually up here. There we go. So the tweets on, there we go, on January, February, March, April 9th, 2018, that particular tweet has 12 positive words. So his most positive tweet, or yes, his most positive tweet occurred on that particular day, in that particular time. So now we need to do one other thing. We're going to learn a new function here. It's called an asDate formatting function. And basically what we're doing is for that created at timestamp, so if you recall here, we're going to make sure it's formatted correctly. And this is really important for when we want to do some plotting, because we want to specify exactly what that format should look like. So in our case, we're saying the format is going to be a string of text here is going to include the year first, and then the month, and then the day, and then the actual time. So let's go ahead and do that, and now we can actually do some plotting. All right, so we've taken our tidy Trump tweets. We've gone ahead and reformatted the date. We're going to do our sentiment join there so we get positive or negative for the words. And then we're going to go ahead and do some counting. Let's go ahead and run this. There we go. Let's take a look at this particular thing right here, this new object that we created. View. And there we go. So now we have on a given date how many negative words occurred. And because we told it we wanted to filter out and only look at the rows where the sentiment was negative, what we effectively want to do is see how his use of negative words has changed over time. So now we have the sentiment and plot that only contains tweets and how many negative words occurs for each of those tweets. And let's do some basic plotting here. So as you can see, this should look very familiar from our ggplot lessons. We're including this Trump sentiment plot data frame that we just created up here. We're saying on the x-axis we want the date, which we just formatted up here so it's correct. And then on the y-axis we want just simply the counts for the negative words on those particular dates. We're going to create a very basic line graph, and we're going to make sure the color is red. We're going to specify the theme is minimal. We don't have to do that. This is just for clarity purposes. Then we're going to assign some labels. So on the y-axis, we want to include this label. Then on the x-axis, we just want to have the date there. So let's go ahead and run that, and we should get a very basic plot here. From April 11th to April 2018. Let's zoom in a little bit. And there we go. So we can see how use of negative words changed over time. There we go. So that's pretty much a quick kind of overview of doing sentiment analysis with tweets. Everything should seem very familiar. Hopefully, the only thing that should feel new out of this is the date formatting, which is kind of key, and then removing some words using the grep function. And then joining on sentiments should feel pretty familiar at this point. Doing counts with dplyr should feel very familiar. And then some of these other things should feel very familiar as well. So just for fun, really quickly, I was kind of curious what would happen if I applied the same analysis to look at my own tweets. So if you remember from earlier in this lesson, I went and pulled my tweets using the rtweets package. I'm going to apply the exact same things from the Trump tweets to my own tweets to see kind of how my use of negative words compare. So first things first, let's go ahead and tokenize those tweets. We're going to unnest those tokens and we're going to put them into a new column, the text column from the tweets, and put them into a new column called word so that each individual word in a tweet occurs on its own separate row. So let's go ahead and do that. And let's go ahead and take a look at that. There we go. So this is most recent tweet, goofing around with the Twitter API. There we go. Let's go ahead and remove those stop words now. And let's go ahead and take a look at those. And there we go. Let's view those. All right. So I've already arranged them. As you can see, I've got the same issues that I want to do some cleaning, get rid of the t.code, get rid of the httpe and the https. And let's go ahead and do some filtering here. Oops, sorry about that. I'm going to remove some of those things, just like in the last lesson, or just a moment ago with the Trump tweets, removed all of those words that weren't necessarily essential. I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to remove Mark's Twitter handle there as well. He's going to show up in the top ones because I tend to either tweet at him or I tend to retweet his tweets. So let's go ahead and do that and remove those. Take a quick look. There we go. So we can see the words that I frequently use in my tweets are words like learning, data, MOOC, education, research, teachers, North Carolina, digital, etc., etc. So you can kind of get a sense of the topics that I'm interested in when I'm tweeting, and these tend to be things that I read in my news feeds as well. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at there we go, my negative tweets. There we go. Do some tidying here. I'm going to format the date. And I'll look at my negative tweets. And I'm going to create positive tweets as well because I'm curious if I tweet more negative or positive. So when I do my filtering here, I'm going to say select all the rows where the sentiment column is positive. And then I'm going to do a count for those as well. All right. And let's take a look at each of those. So negative. All right. So I'm kind of curious. The most negative worded tweet I had included 5 negative words. That was back in 2013. I'm curious what that one is. And let's see. The most positive tweet I have included 10 positive words, again back in 2013. So I've been on Twitter for a while, though I'm not a prolific tweeter. Here we go. So let's go back to doing some plotting here. I'm going to plot my negative tweets, take a look at those. Oh boy, you can see there's a huge gap there from 2016 to 2018. Where I didn't tweet for a long time. You can see it's kind of spiked up here a little bit. And let's go ahead and take a look at my positive tweets. I'm going to color these blue. Take a quick look. Interesting. So I was still tweeting during that time period. They just tend to be much more positive. So anyways, that's a sense of doing that with a different data set. In this case, I'm using my own. So for the last part of this lesson, we're going to be taking a look at Chapter 7 in our Text Mining with R book. And we're going to be taking a look at comparing Twitter archives. In the book, they're comparing Julia and David's archives, the authors of this book. directions are including for downloading your own archive. However, I did want to state that in the book, if you do attempt to download your own Twitter archive, it's going to be JSON files, not the neat and tidy CSV files that they use. So I'm assuming at some point they converted those into CSV files of their tweets. But I will run through this code for you. Chapter 7 you do not have to run on your own, but I do recommend that you read through the entire chapter just so you can get a sense of what's going on. Some other ways that you can be using Twitter data to make some comparisons or do some analyses as well. The main thing that I'm going to demonstrate, though, is some of the use of dplyr instead of the grep, the grep function, for cleaning out some unwanted words. So let's do a quick run through of the Chapter 7 examples and exercises. All right, I got ahead of myself here. For this particular chapter, we need to load a few tidyverse packages. The LibreDate package is for working with dates and times. As you can see in our previous lesson, we used a different function for that, a base function called as.date. There it is. So for formatting date, we used that one. dplyr in the tidyverse set of packages has its own package, not surprisingly, for working with dates. So we're going to load that. We're going to load ggplot. We're going to load dplyr. We're going to load readr, also from the tidyverse set of packages, tidytext, and then finally stringr, which is also from the tidyverse set of packages. And again, I'm just running through these. I think I already had all of these loaded, but just in case, I wanted to make sure I had those available. So for our purposes, in this particular demonstration, she's using Julia and David's tweets. Obviously, I don't have access to those. So instead, I'm going to, oops, lost myself there. So instead, I'm going to be using my tweets and my colleague Mark Sandberg's tweets for comparison for this lesson. So I am using the getTimelines function from the rtweet package to get our tweets. If I wanted to, I could write those to my, there we go, I could write those to my data folder, similar to what Julia and Dave have. I'm not going to write those to my data folder since they're already loaded up here. Where'd they go? Yep, since they're already loaded up here. And already included in R. There we go, Sean tweets right there. Let's get Mark tweets. And we are ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and load those. If I were loading them from my data folder that's included in my working directory, then I would use the readCSV function, but since they're already loaded, I don't need to do that. I'm going to bind our tweets together using the bind rows function. So I'm going to take my tweets, let's see, where it's called person, I'm going to call that person Sean. Hold on, let me run that. All right, let me take a look at these tweets. I'm kind of curious here. There we go. I should have created a new variable called person, which is probably appended at the very end. There it is, person. So now we know whose tweets are whose. There we go. So I created a new person variable is Sean for my tweets. For Mark, I created a new variable called person called Mark. And finally, I'm going to create a new variable called timestamp. And I'm going to use the ymd-hms function. So year, month, day, hours, minutes, seconds, because that's how the created at, let me pull this up really quick. Scroll back over here. There we go, the created at column, which stores the timestamp information. That stores the data as year, month, day, hour, minute, second. So just really quick, let's explore this ymd-hms function. ymd-hms, and there we go. So this is from the LibreDate package. And this is how I can just quickly format the created at timestamp. So you can see this is going to be a little bit faster than using the as.date function. Much easier to work with, as are most of the tidyverse set of packages and functions. So now I have my tweets. I'm ready to do some plotting. Let's go ahead. I'm going to do ggplot. I'm going to make a histogram of our last 500 tweets. Let's see. So on the y-axis, I'm going to use the timestamp. And then for the number of tweets, I'm going to have it go ahead and just fill it in by person. I'm going to make a histogram. And I'm going to bin this for every 20 tweets. And then finally, facet wrap, if you recall, that's for creating small multiples of graphs. In this case, it's going to create a separate graph for each person in this data set. In this case, Mark and myself. So let's go ahead and do some plotting. And let's pop this out, take a look. It's pretty big, don't need it that big. As you can see, I only told it to pull the last 500 tweets. So just this year alone, it looks like Mark has already tweeted 500, where it's taken me since 2013 to tweet that much. So clearly he's a much more prolific tweeter than I am. So now that we've done some basic plotting, just to take a kind of look at that, let's, there we go. Let's review some of the cleaning that she does and kind of walk through some of this. There's a lot going on here and a lot to unpack. Let's start here. Obviously, we're going to create a new variable called tidy tweets. We're going to take our tweets that we created by binding my tweets and Mark's tweets together. And we're going to do some filtering. So with the Chris Bale example, we did the filtering with those brackets, if you recall. We had the, there we go, the brackets. And it took two arguments. And the first one was the rows that we wanted to filter out by word, and then the columns that we wanted it to filter by. That is a sort of non-intuitive way to do it. Although I'm not sure this is going to be much more intuitive. So in our case, we're going to use dplyr to do some filtering. So we're going to tell it to look for strings that contain this particular character, and we're going to tell it to remove those. We're going to create a new variable, and effectively all of these characters here, these are the ones that we want to remove. So we're going to take our text column that contains all of our tweets. So let's go back up here just to demonstrate. There's the text column, contains all of the tweets. And from this list of things that we created that we want to remove, we're going to use the function string remove all. So any characters that contain these things from the text column, we're going to tell it to remove and to put it into a new column called text. Basically, we're just overwriting the text column that's already there. And then finally, we're going to do our unnest tokens. What's important to pay attention to here is that you can tokenize. There's a special token in the tidy text package called tweets. So it recognizes tweets and all the unique characters in those. And then finally, doing some filtering and removing some stop words this way. She does a nice job of explaining why we have to go this route to remove some of these stop words. So that's cleaned up our tweets quite a bit. And we've tokenized those tweets, so now we're going to have a column called word that has taken the text from all of our tweets from the text column and turned it into one word per row for all of our tweets. And then let's look at this really quick. So tidy tweets, as you can see, that's greatly expanded the total number of observations. Now we're up to 10,000 because obviously we have more than no more than a single word on a given row. So now we're going to do just a kind of replication of one final analysis for the Chapter 7 case study. And we're going to effectively take a look at the word frequencies for each person between Mark and myself to kind of get a sense of which words we tend to use more frequently among our tweets. So we're going to take our tidy tweets data frame that we created, that we've cleaned up and we've unnested those tokens and tokenized and processed. And we're going to say, let's group those by person, so between Mark and myself. For Mark and myself, we're going to get a count of all the words that we've used in each of our 500 tweets. And then we are going to join onto that our total summary there. And then we're going to create a new column called frequency, which effectively takes our count of, which takes the total number of words in all of our tweets, and it's going to take how many times each word occurred out of the total number of words. So we're going to get a frequency for those word occurrences to get a sense of which words between Mark and myself are used the most frequently. So let's go ahead and run that. And then finally, let's just go ahead and take a look at this. So there we go. So the most frequent words among our particular collection of tweets, for myself, it was learning. Mark in particular, because I tend to either tweet at him or retweet a lot of his stuff, data, education, etc. For Mark, interestingly enough, the words time, school, students, teachers, myself, teachers as well, people. So it's kind of interesting. You can see there's quite a bit of overlap between our topics of interest, at least with respect to tweeting out on Twitter. So that's lesson 4 in a nutshell. Just to kind of recap, we went over using the Twitter API and the rtweet package to get tweets from Twitter and to do some things like passing on our credentials, using the search function to get tweets by hashtag, looking at ways to view those tweets, some quick ways for plotting them, and then also to get tweets for individual users. Through the Chris Bale work, just to quickly summarize, we looked at some tweets by Trump and also by myself, and we did some very basic sentiment analysis using the Bing lexicon for just positive and negative words. And then finally, we got examples of using dplyr to do some filtering and cleaning of those tweets, as well as using our unnest tokens function and specifying tweets as the unique character. One last time, she explains it in the text pretty well, but using tweets allows us to keep things. Typically, when we unnest tokens, it's going to remove special characters like the @ symbol. But by specifying that these are tweets that we want to tokenize, it's going to know which characters, special characters to keep. So that's lesson 5. This is actually going to be our last lesson for the unit. So there's only 4 lessons total for part 2 of unit 2. Again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to either contact me directly by email or by phone, or if you think it's something that's going to be useful and helpful to others, to post it in the discussion forum.